The year was 2476, and humanity had long been dismissed by the Galactic Council as a primitive, unremarkable species confined to a small, resource-poor planet on the outer rim of known space. Their technology considered inferior, their armies laughably weak, and their civilization barely worth monitoring. Yet in the shadows of Earth's surface and orbiting stations, humanity was quietly evolving, advancing its fleets, developing weapons and strategies that no other species could anticipate, and nurturing a generation of scientists, engineers, soldiers, and leaders who understood that survival required ingenuity, courage, and a willingness to confront any adversary no matter how powerful. Captain Elena Harper stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned starship Aegis, her gaze fixed on the holographic display of the approaching alien fleet, a collection of vessels 3 times larger than anything humanity had ever built. And yet she felt no fear because she knew the humans she commanded were trained for every contingency, equipped with technology designed to exploit the overconfidence of their foes, and motivated by centuries of being dismissed and underestimated, a quiet fury that had transformed to precise tactical brilliance. Below deck, engineers monitored energy reactors capable of producing bursts of power that could disable enemy shields in moments, while weapons officers calibrated railguns, plasma cannons, and experimental quantum disruptors that could pierce armor thought invulnerable, all working in seamless coordination, a symphony of human innovation and discipline that the galaxy had never expected from a planet they had long ignored. And as the alien ambassador's message flashed across the communication array, dripping with condescension and threats of immediate annihilation if humanity did not surrender, the Council's smugness was palpable even through the digital transmission, unaware that their words were fueling the determination of every human aboard the fleet, igniting a resolve that would drive them to defy expectations, exploit every weakness, and demonstrate that the so-called weaklings of Earth were in fact warriors tempered by adversity, united by loyalty, and capable of strategies that leveraged not just technology, but cunning deception and an understanding of the alien psyche, insights gleaned from decades of observation, covert intelligence, and simulations designed to predict the enemy's reactions. And as the fleet's commanders gathered in the strategy room, maps of star systems and alien supply lines projected in three-dimensional grids, discussions flowed rapidly, voices calm but urgent, every potential outcome debated, every maneuver weighed, and every human present understood that the coming engagement would be more than a battle. It would be a revelation to the galaxy that humanity was no longer to be dismissed, underestimated, or controlled. And as the Aegis slipped into warp to intercept the alien advance, reconnaissance drones relaying live feeds of enemy formations, the first shockwave of humanity's comeback began, invisible to the alien eye, but undeniable in its effect on the balance of power, because the humans had learned to exploit their opponent's arrogance, to turn numerical inferiority into tactical advantage, to harness creativity as a weapon, and to demonstrate in brutal efficiency that a species mocked as weak could orchestrate a strike so precise, so overwhelming, that even the most confident commanders of the Galactic Council would be forced to acknowledge the emergence of a power they had ignored at their peril. In the command center, Elena Harper's voice cut through the quiet hum of systems, steady and resolute, directing her fleet into positions that would maximize their strengths while minimizing exposure. And across Earth, scientists monitored the outcome, engineers prepared reinforcements, civilians followed every transmission, a collective heartbeat rising in anticipation of a moment that would rewrite humanity's place in the cosmos, the first of many steps in a campaign that would transform perception of an entire galaxy, a campaign that would turn whispers of human insignificance into declarations of awe and fear. And as the alien fleet crossed the threshold into human-controlled space, expecting to crush a pitiful resistance, they instead encountered a coordinated network of defenses, surprise ambushes, decoy formations, and electromagnetic pulses that disabled key systems before the humans ever revealed the full extent of their power. And in that instant, the galaxy began to learn that Earth's weaklings had become warriors, that their calculated patience, relentless training, and strategic ingenuity were instruments of a comeback that no empire, council, or alien race could ignore, a comeback that would be remembered in histories across dozens of star systems, a testament to the species that had been underestimated, mocked, and dismissed, but refused to remain so, a species prepared to reclaim its place among the stars with a vengeance measured, precise, and unstoppable. As the first volleys of human-engineered weapons struck the alien advance, sending shutters through massive holes and forcing sudden evasive maneuvers that no alien commander had predicted, the crews aboard the Aegis and its sister ships felt a surge of vindication and adrenaline, a confirmation that decades of clandestine research, tactical simulations, and rigorous training had prepared them for this moment, and every human pilot, gunner, engineer, and officer understood that they were, rewriting the rules of engagement in real time, exploiting weaknesses in alien shields, targeting critical power conduits, and using maneuvers that defied conventional thought. Strategies developed from studying alien psychology, anticipating that arrogance would lead to predictable mistakes. While back on Earth, command centers monitored the battle with growing amazement at the efficiency of human coordination and communication, the use of rapid information exchange and adaptive AI assistance, allowing them to predict enemy responses before they happened. And even the civilian observers, accustomed to hearing about human inferiority, found themselves cheering, stunned by the ingenuity, resilience, and speed at which the human forces operated, as fighter squadrons executed simultaneous attacks from multiple vectors, disrupting supply chains and communications, while capital ships delivered precision strikes designed to disable critical systems without unnecessary destruction. A testament to the tactical discipline that had been instilled in every member of the fleet and the moral imperative that guided their actions, a balance of ferocity and calculated restraint that the alien forces had never encountered. And within the alien command vessels, panic began to ripple as communications jammed, navigation systems faltered under the coordinated pressure, and subordinate commanders reported losses that contradicted every expectation, while alien diplomats frantically tried to issue orders and negotiate ceasefires, unaware that humanity had already anticipated such desperation, designed contingencies to exploit hesitation, and prepared decoy operations to lure larger fleets into traps. And as reinforcement from nearby systems attempted to intervene, they too were met with ambushes, carefully calculated explosions, and electronic warfare measures that rendered their sensors unreliable and their weapons less effective, demonstrating that humanity's comeback was not an isolated incident, but a meticulously planned campaign that leveraged superior adaptability, ingenuity, and psychological insight, turning the tables on species that had assumed superiority for centuries while within the human fleet. Captain Elena Harper coordinated every maneuver with clarity and calm, her decisions informed by live intelligence, simulations running simultaneously with the engagement, and the unwavering confidence that every human under her command would execute the plan to perfection. And as battles unfolded in multiple sectors, humans demonstrated not only military innovation, but diplomatic acumen, intercepting alien communications, deciphering codes, and sowing confusion among their opponents, forcing them to react to events that humans had already anticipated, creating a sense of inevitability that eroded morale. And across the galaxy, news of Earth's unexpected victories spread through both official channels and clandestine reports, shaking the confidence of other empires, councils, and alien factions, causing debates over whether humanity had somehow developed technology, strategies, or coordination that no other species had managed. And as the dust settled over the first wave of confrontations, humans had gained control over strategic star systems, disabled enemy supply lines, and demonstrated a level of tactical brilliance that turned ridicule into fear. The transformation from weaklings to warriors now undeniable, the galaxy beginning to recognize that humanity's calculated patience, intelligence, and determination had produced a species capable of confronting any threat, exploiting every flaw, and overturning assumptions with ruthless efficiency. And in quiet moments aboard ships and command centers, humans allowed themselves fleeting smiles, acknowledging the long journey from being underestimated to commanding respect, knowing that this was only the beginning of a comeback that would reshape the balance of power and force. The entire galaxy to reconsider the underestimated species that had grown stronger, wiser, and deadlier than anyone had ever imagined, a species that would not rest until its place among the stars was secure, and the lesson that Earth's weaklings had become warriors was permanently etched into the consciousness of every alien who had doubted them. In the weeks that followed the initial clashes, the alien empires struggled to comprehend what had happened, their analysts poring over fragmented battle data and incomplete sensor records that showed impossible trajectories, weapons output far exceeding human estimates, and coordinated maneuvers that suggested not desperation but mastery. While within the human-controlled systems, the mood shifted from cautious optimism to controlled determination as Earth's leadership understood that this was no longer a defensive response, but the opening phase of a prolonged reckoning. And in a fortified orbital command station above Earth, President Alan Brooks met with senior military commanders, intelligence directors, and scientific advisors, listening intently as projections showed alien supply routes collapsing under targeted strikes, diplomatic channels flooding with confused inquiries, and several minor alien states quietly withdrawing support from the Council that had sanctioned the assault on Earth, a political fracture forming alongside the military victories. And Brooks spoke calmly, reminding everyone that arrogance had blinded the galaxy to humanity's growth, and that restraint, not recklessness, would define their next moves, while across the fleet captains received updated orders emphasizing precision, adaptability, and psychological pressure rather than brute force. Instructions designed to amplify alien uncertainty and force mistakes that humans could exploit without overextending. And aboard the Aegis, Elena Harper observed her crew with a measured sense of pride as young officers who had once doubted themselves now executed complex operations with confidence born from success, engineers improvising repairs mid-battle, pilots coordinating silently through shared tactical overlays, and analysts updating threat models in real time as alien behavior deviated from established doctrine, revealing fractures in command hierarchies that humans had long suspected but never confirmed until now. And on the alien side, fear crept into councils that had ruled by assumption for centuries, elders arguing over whether humanity had hidden allies or forbidden technologies, generals blaming one another for underestimating a species they had labeled insignificant, and ambassadors desperately attempting to reopen negotiations from a position that was rapidly eroding, while covert human operatives exploited these divisions, leaking selectively altered intelligence, reinforcing alien paranoia, and encouraging rival factions to hesitate or withdraw, a subtle form of warfare that proved as effective as any weapon. And as skirmishes escalated into full system-wide engagements, humanity unveiled the next layer of its strategy, deploying modular fleets capable of rapid reconfiguration, ships designed to operate independently or in tightly synchronized formations depending on the threat, confusing alien targeting systems, and overwhelming rigid command structures that could not adapt quickly enough. And for the first time, alien crews found themselves reacting rather than dictating, forced into defensive postures that eroded morale and exposed vulnerabilities, while human scientists continued to refine energy weapons, propulsion systems, and defensive matrices using live combat data, accelerating innovation at a pace that left alien research divisions struggling to keep up. And throughout the galaxy, whispers spread of human endurance. Stories of crews fighting through damage that would cripple other species, of commanders sacrificing personal safety to save allies, of a cultural cohesion that transformed individual courage into collective strength. And these stories, amplified by surviving witnesses and intercepted transmissions, began to reshape perceptions, turning fear into reluctant respect among some and desperate hostility among others. And as the third major alien offensive collapsed under a coordinated counterstrike that severed its command ship and left entire fleets adrift, humanity stood at a crossroads, aware that their transformation from dismissed weaklings to formidable warriors was now undeniable, that the galaxy was watching, recalculating, and preparing for whatever came next. And in that quiet after-action moment aboard the Aegis, Elena Harper reflected that the greatest weapon humanity possessed was not its technology or numbers, but its ability to learn, adapt, and endure, qualities forged through centuries of struggle that had finally found expression on a galactic stage, ensuring that Earth's comeback was no longer a question of survival, but a declaration of permanence among the stars. As humanity's victories accumulated and the balance of power continued to tilt, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session within its vast floating citadel, a place that had once symbolized unquestioned authority, but now echoed with unease, its chambers filled with raised voices, accusations, and the unmistakable tension of leaders realizing they no longer controlled the narrative, while holographic projections displayed system after system slipping from council influence as human task. Forces dismantled supply depots, neutralized listening posts, and seized strategic transit nodes without unnecessary destruction, sending a clear message that this was not chaos but calculated pressure, and among the council delegates fear took many forms. some demanding total war and extermination of Earth before humanity grew any stronger, others urging negotiation, warning that continued aggression would only expose further weaknesses, while intelligence briefings confirmed what many had feared, that humanity had not relied on a single breakthrough or secret weapon, but on layered preparation, flexible doctrine, and a culture initiative that allowed even junior officers to adapt faster than alien command structures could respond. And back on Earth, the human population watched these developments with a mix of pride and restraint, aware that every victory brought greater scrutiny and higher stakes. As President Alan Brooks addressed the public in measured tones, emphasizing unity, discipline, and the importance of proving that humanity's rise will be defined by responsibility as much as strength, words that resonated across colonies and fleets, reinforcing morale without inflaming arrogance, while in forward command zones Elena Harper and other fleet leaders prepared for the inevitable counterstroke, analyzing intercepted communications that revealed a massive coalition fleet assembling beyond known space, an armada built on numbers and tradition rather than adaptability. And rather than meeting it head-on, human strategists designed a response rooted in misdirection, drawing the coalition into contested regions riddled with sensor ghosts, false signals, and hidden kill zones, environments carefully shaped by human engineers to disrupt alien formation tactics. And as the coalition advanced, confident in overwhelming force, their commanders failed to notice subtle inconsistencies, the delayed responses, the strange silence where resistance should have been strongest, until the trap closed and human fleets emerged from multiple vectors, striking command ships, isolating wings, and forcing independent alien contingents to fight without coordination, turned their own size into a liability, while electronic warfare blinded targeting arrays and precision strikes disabled propulsion systems, leaving massive vessels drifting helplessly as smaller human ships moved in with disciplined efficiency, and across the battlefield human crews executed their roles with calm focus, trusting training in one another, improvising when plans met reality, and maintaining momentum through constant communication and shared situational awareness, a stark contrast to alien crews bound by rigid hierarchy and delayed decision-making. And as the coalition fleet fractured and began a chaotic retreat, the psychological impact rippled far beyond the immediate losses, shaking confidence in the Council's leadership and inspiring several neutral civilizations to declare non-aggression or open dialogue with Earth, sensing that humanity's ascent was no longer theoretical but irreversible, and within the Council's citadel silence replaced argument as reports confirmed the scale of defeat, the realization setting in that the species they had once dismissed as weaklings had not only become warriors but had done so without losing cohesion or purpose. And in the aftermath, humanity chose restraint once more, securing gains without pursuit into civilian sectors, broadcasting clear terms for disengagement, and demonstrating that strength did not require cruelty, a choice that further complicated alien responses and forced the galaxy to confront a new reality, one where Earth was no longer an afterthought, but a central force shaping the future of interstellar order. In the wake of the coalition fleet's collapse, the galaxy entered a period of tense recalibration, old alliances fraying as worlds that had once unquestioningly followed the Galactic Council now reconsidered their loyalties, and humanity moved deliberately through this uncertainty, consolidating control over key corridors, repairing damaged systems, and extending limited aid to neutral or formerly hostile civilizations willing to disengage, actions that were carefully documented and broadcast to counter decades of propaganda that had painted humans as unstable and primitive. While within Earth's strategic command, the focus shifted toward long-term stability, intelligence assessments mapping which factions might resist humanity's rise and which might adapt, and President Alan Brooks convened a closed session of diplomats, military leaders, and economic planners to outline a vision where strength served deterrence rather than conquest, a message that resonated with human commanders who understood the cost of endless war. And aboard the Aegis, Elena Harper received new directives that emphasized presence rather than pursuit, patrols designed to reassure allies and discourage renewed aggression. And as her fleet entered systems that had once barred human entry, they encountered populations surprised by the professionalism and restraint of human crews, the absence of looting or indiscriminate violence challenging deeply ingrained fears. And these encounters became quiet, victories of their own, eroding resistance and opening channels for cooperation, While remnants of the Council's hardline factions plotted in secrecy, refusing to accept a diminished role in pooling resources to develop countermeasures, their efforts hampered by infighting and mistrust seeded by human intelligence operations, and as isolated clashes flared and were swiftly contained, humanity continued to refine its doctrines, integrating alien technologies captured in battle, adapting them, with characteristic creativity, and training new officers drawn from a generation inspired by recent events but tempered by lessons of restraint and responsibility. And across the galaxy, stories spread not just a human firepower, but a human endurance, adaptability, and a willingness to learn from both success and failure, qualities that unsettled those who still clung to the belief that humanity's rise was a temporary anomaly. And in a pivotal address to the Galactic Council chambers, now half empty, President Brooks spoke directly to the assembled delegates, acknowledging past grievances, outlining clear boundaries, and extending an offer of coexistence grounded in mutual respect rather than dominance, an offer that forced even humanity's critics to confront the reality that the so-called weaklings had not only become warriors, but leaders capable of shaping a more balanced interstellar order. And as negotiations began amid lingering suspicion, human fleets remained vigilant but restrained, a silent reminder that the balance of power had shifted permanently, and that Earth's comeback was not defined by a single battle or campaign, but by a sustained transformation in how humanity understood itself and its place among the stars, no longer seeking validation from those who had dismissed it, but confident in its ability to defend, negotiate, and endure, setting the stage for a future where strength and responsibility will be tested again, but on terms humanity was now prepared to meet. As negotiations unfolded and fragile ceasefires took hold across contested regions, humanity remained acutely aware that peace built on shifting power required constant vigilance, and intelligence reports soon confirmed those concerns as fragments of the former Council's military began to disappear from known space, their movements masked by outdated charts and unregulated transit lanes, prompting human analysts to conclude that a final, desperate gambit was forming beyond the margins of galactic oversight, and rather than reacting with haste, Earth's leadership chose patience, allowing these remnants to consolidate while covert surveillance mapped their routes, supply chains, and command structures, and within months a clear picture emerged of a hardline alliance preparing a decisive strike intended not just to defeat human fleets, but to terrorize civilian populations and fracture Earth's political unity, a plan that revealed how little these factions understood the cohesion that had emerged among humans during the war. And as this intelligence reached forward commanders, Elena Harper and her peers adjusted deployment patterns subtly, reinforcing vulnerable systems under guise of routine patrols and positioning rapid response units where they could intercept without revealing intent, while back on Earth civil defense networks were quietly upgraded and emergency protocols rehearsed without public alarm, demonstrating a maturity born of hard-earned experience. And when the long-anticipated attack finally came, it did not unfold as the conspirators expected. Their first strikes intercepted by layered defenses and decoy installations that absorbed the impact, while human fleets closed in from concealed positions, cutting off retreat and isolating command vessels. And in the ensuing engagements, the difference between humanity's adaptive doctrine and the enemy's rigid desperation became stark, as human ships shifted roles fluidly, support vessels becoming strike platforms, scouts coordinating ambushes, and command decisions made in seconds rather than minutes, overwhelming opponents who relied on predetermined plans. And as the battle progressed, human forces broadcast clear surrender terms, offering safe passage to crews willing to disengage, an option many accepted as the futility of resistance became clear, while those who refused found themselves systematically disarmed and contained, their capacity for further violence neutralized without unnecessary loss of life. And the psychological impact of this confrontation echoed across the galaxy, reinforcing perception that humanity's strength lay not just in its weapons, but in its discipline, coordination, and resolve, qualities that made escalation a losing proposition. And in the aftermath, Earth's leaders authorized a limited disclosure to the intercepted plans, exposing the intentions of the hardline factions and undermining any remaining sympathy for their cause, a move that accelerated the collapse of resistance and strengthened the legitimacy of emerging agreements. And as fleets returned to patrol and reconstruction efforts expanded, humanity found itself in an unfamiliar position, no longer reacting to threats, but shaping conditions that prevented them. And aboard the Aegis, as crew stood down from battle readiness and watched distant stars drift by, Elena Harper understood that the journey from weaklings to warriors had reached a new phase, one where the true test would be sustaining peace without complacency, maintaining strength without cruelty, and ensuring that the lessons learned through conflict would guide humanity forward as a stabilizing force in a galaxy that would never again underestimate Earth. With overt hostilities fading and the last coordinated resistance dismantled, the galaxy entered a period of uneasy reflection, and humanity turned inward as much as outward, assessing the cost of survival and the responsibilities that now rested on its shoulders, while new institutions formed to manage the balance between military readiness and diplomatic engagement, blending civilian oversight with hard-earned battlefield experience. And Earth's fleets were reorganized not for conquest, but for rapid response, disaster relief, and deterrence, a posture that signaled continuity of strength without aggressive expansion. And in systems once scarred by conflict, human engineers worked alongside alien technicians to restore infrastructure, earning trust through competence and consistency rather than force, while cultural exchanges began cautiously, revealing how deeply alien societies had misunderstood humanity, often mistaking adaptability for recklessness and emotional expression for instability, misconceptions that slowly unraveled through sustained interaction. And within Earth's political sphere, debates grew sharper as leaders argued over how far humanity should go in reshaping galactic norms, some advocating firm guardianship to prevent future councils from repeating past mistakes, others urging restraint to avoid replacing one form of dominance with another. And President Alan Brooks navigated these tensions with measured resolve, insisting that humanity's legitimacy came from choice rather than coercion, a principle tested repeatedly as smaller powers sought protection or alliance. And aboard the Aegis, Elena Harper participated in joint patrols with former adversaries, observing firsthand the lingering fear and cautious respect that marked these encounters, moments where shared objectives slowly replaced suspicion, and yet beneath the surface vigilance never faded. Intelligence networks tracking subtle shifts, economic pressures, and ideological movements that could one day coalesce into renewed opposition, reminders that peace was a process rather than an endpoint. And as memorials were raised across human and alien worlds alike to honor losses in the conflict, narratives began to change, no longer centered solely on humanity's surprise victories, but on the broader lesson of underestimation and the dangers of complacent power. And these stories circulated through academic forums, military academies, and public discourse, shaping a generation that understood both the necessity and the cost of becoming warriors. And as years passed, the immediate memory of battle softened, but its influence endured, embedded in doctrine, culture, and collective identity, ensuring that humanity's transformation was not a fleeting reaction to crisis, but a lasting evolution. And in quiet moments aboard ships and stations, humans reflected on how far they'd come, from a species dismissed at the edges of galactic maps to one whose actions now influenced the fate of countless worlds, aware that the final measure of their comeback would not be the wars they had won, but the stability they could preserve, and that the true challenge still lay ahead in proving, over time, that Earth's warriors could remain guardians without losing the humility forged in the days when the galaxy had laughed at them. As the decades settled into history, and the galaxy adjusted to a new equilibrium, humanity's role became both clearer and more complex, no longer defined by reaction to threat, but by the expectations placed upon a power that had proven itself capable of reshaping destiny. And Earth's presence was felt not through domination, but through influence, its fleets patrolling shared corridors, its diplomats mediating disputes once settled by violence, and its scientists contributing openly to joint projects that advanced navigation, medicine, and energy across multiple civilizations, while the Galactic Council, reformed and reduced in authority, stood as a reminder of what unchecked arrogance could cost, its new charter shaped in part by human insistence on accountability and adaptability. And for those alien species that had once dismissed humanity, the lesson endured, taught in academies and whispered in political chambers, that strength could emerge quietly, that patience could be a weapon, and that underestimation was often the first step toward ruin. And on Earth, the stories of the war were passed down not as tales of glory alone, but as warnings, emphasizing the unity, sacrifice, and restraint that had allowed humans to survive without losing themselves, while veterans like Elena Harper eventually stepped away from command into advisory roles. guiding new generations who had grown up in a galaxy where humanity was no longer ignored, and in rare interviews she spoke not of battles won, but of moments when restraint had mattered more than firepower, when choosing not to strike had secured peace more effectively than any victory. And as Earth's children looked up at the stars, they no longer saw a hostile unknown, but a shared frontier shaped by responsibility as much as courage, aware that their ancestors had crossed a threshold from weakness to strength and then faced the harder task of wielding that strength wisely. And across distant worlds monuments stood, bearing inscriptions translated into dozens of languages, all echoing the same truth, that the species once mocked as weaklings had become warriors not because they sought war, but because they refused to surrender their future, and that the galaxy endured in a fragile but lasting balance precisely because humanity remembered what it had been like to be underestimated, choosing to ensure that no other civilization would have to prove its worth through destruction. And in that understanding, Earth's galactic comeback reached its true conclusion, not in the silence after battle, but in the steady rhythm of a peace earned, guarded, and never again taken for granted.